Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Grand Slam Journey podcast, where I, together with my guests, discuss various topics related to finding purpose, maximizing our potential, sports, life after sports, and transitioning from one chapter of our lives to the next. My today's guest is Tracy Reifkind. Tracy, also nicknamed the Queen of the Kettlebell Swing, is the author of the book The Swing, Lose the Fat and Get Fit with this revolutionary kettlebell program. Tracy and I talk a lot about life transformation, inspired by her personal journey. Tracy didn't grow up being an athlete, but I would argue that the personal transformation she went through in her 40s led her to learn and practice what I call the athletic mindset. I believe it is much harder to change our habits later in life. And so I have been amazed by the transformation that Tracy achieved and sustained since then. The attention to detail, consistency, discipline, and positive mindset that allowed her to lose 120 pounds by swinging kettlebell and cooking her own food. I met Tracy about a year ago through my dog, Rhodesian Ridgeback Allie. Allie and Walker, Tracy's Rhodesian Ridgeback, have become friends. And so naturally, Tracy and I started speaking, and I have learned about her amazing journey. Tracy also invited me to train with her, which I inserted a copy of our training that Tracy recorded in the episode show notes. I was so sore that I couldn't walk for probably a week after the training. During this podcast, we talk about Tracy's personal transformation into the athlete she always wanted to be. Obviously, we touch base in a lot of aspects of her book. Kettlebell training, why is it so effective and why it works so well? The importance of mindset and progressions, looking at the trend lines and gradual goal setting. What does it mean to be an athlete? The athletic mindset, readiness zone, drive, inspiration, consistency, confidence, the power of visualization, taking responsibility and getting rid of thoughts that do not serve us, such as playing a victim. And last but not least, the importance of self-love, self-respect, and the practice of being selfish and putting yourself first. A few quotes that I highlighted from the book that I want to read for you. To set yourself on the same track, there are very basic steps to follow. Make changes, aim for results, and build on the motivation from meeting your goals. Next quote on the athletic mindset. The athlete's mindset thrives on the opposite, consistency. It's not about exercising or eating well every once in a while, but about making those practices part of your everyday life. Athletes know this instinctively, but for most people, it doesn't come naturally. A quote about the readiness zone. Athletes connect everything they do to the body. They've developed habits that keep them in the zone, but it's not about the specifics of their habits as much as it is about the consistency of them. And last but not least, always reflect and act from a place of pride about who you are today and who you will become in the future. I truly love talking to Tracy and creating this podcast for you. In fact, I created it twice because my first file crashed. Funny. Wasn't that funny when that happened, but I actually think it turned out better the second time around. And so I hope you enjoy the listen as much as I enjoyed the conversation. And now I bring you Tracy Reifkind. Tracy, thank you so much for accepting my invitation and welcome to the Grand Slam Journey podcast.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. Surprise, surprise for me.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you and your family, your new member, Walker.
Right.
They get so well along with Allie. And
he's been forced on you.
I love that loving force. I will accept it anytime. Dogs are amazing and Ridgebacks are amazing breeds. So that's definitely one thing we share.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about many more. But before we do, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself for the guests who may not know you yet.
I haven't thought about it, how to introduce myself exactly. So what I will say is that my name is Tracy Reifkind, and I wrote a really good book about 10 years ago. And the book is about I don't want to call it a midlife transformation because I think I'm at midlife now, maybe. Mm-hmm. But in my 40s, I had a tremendous weight loss, and exactly how that happened and the events surrounding it have been pretty amazing. So I was asked to write a book about it, and it involves the kettlebell. So back in 2013, not a lot of people knew what a kettlebell was. But how I used that exercise training tool to develop my own type of programming, my own type of choreography, and how it definitely was a major factor in the weight loss and my transformation into the athlete I always wanted to be.
Thank you. I love that intro. And there are so many things I want to dive into. Loved your book. So easy to read, a fantastic manual for changing habits and really adopting almost any habits. Because I think if you go through it, it will probably inspire people what that process of picking up a new habit is. And obviously, we'll dive into more into kettlebells and just that whole mindset. But you touched on the word athlete, and what I wanted to mention is, I feel you describe an athletic mindset fantastically. Like, it's one of the books I was reading. I don't actually even know if athletes themselves, or I'm defining athletes really as people like me who've actually grown up with a sport to be athletes. Mm-hmm. And I feel sometimes when you grow up with it, it's easier to understand it. But your observation of what it means to be an athlete and adopting it in your 40s, as you write about in the book, I think it's just amazing change and inspiration for so many others who, again, may want to change their life in whatever way they want to change it, whether it's developing one habit or another, losing 100 pounds or a couple pounds, or being just a healthier human overall. Mm-hmm.
I have to credit my brilliant husband with helping me with that without knowing. So I happen to have married an amazing athlete, a competitive athlete. And through years and years and years of listening to him and his training partners talk about their training, study their own training, journal their own training, video their own training, and having owned a gym, I was around athletes my entire marriage. I mean, Mark and I met when I was 24, and we met kind of in the gym. We met in a bar, but I had seen him at the gym. So, it's fine. It was the 80s. What can you say? So anyway, a lot of that credit is due to the fact that I was around athletes. And one of the phrases that Mark uses all the time that I love, and he uses it mostly when he talks about weight loss. And he says, I don't make the rules, I just know them. And they apply to me too. So I think when it comes to improving at a sport, there are rules, the rules of physics and progressions and practice and all these things. And there's no shortcuts. And the other thing too is it has to be earned. Nobody gives anybody anything. when it comes to athletic performance and achievement. And that's what makes it so fair, is that it's available for everyone, but it's not given to anybody. Now, there are opportunities that are given to people. Like, I think one of the biggest reasons that I was never a competitive athlete as a young person is because I wasn't given the opportunity. I didn't know that you could join a team somewhere.
Yeah.
I didn't know about weight rooms. I was a fat kid, so doing a cartwheel, I only bring that up because what little girl doesn't want to be a gymnastics, star? So,
yeah, I remember doing cartwheels when I was a kid too. And I was a very tall gymnast when I was very young. I never fit into the gymnastics, but I tried it, even though I was awkward and not talented for gymnastics.
Yeah, and I didn't have parents that were athletes or did anything athletic or encouraged me. I mean, yes, I did, your basic stuff, but there was never an emphasis on athletics at all. And being a chubby child, I was not exactly the first person to be chosen for the team. So, I was overlooked because of my size as a child. That bred a lot of frustration for me. And I think I just exploded when it was finally my turn. I just exploded with enthusiasm. And yes, I'm going to do this and I'm going to show them all. Revenge, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a little emotion behind it, I think. A little childhood trauma.
Yeah. I think we all have those as we go through life.
Totally.
It's good to be aware of them and our triggers and figure out and filter through what we want to live with and like and dislike and how we want to go on through life. But I do want to highlight just, you mentioned you've never been an athlete being a kid, but you've been such a fantastic observer. Reading the book, it really makes me feel just the focus and commitment and the attention to detail that you put in, and to go the hard way. And I say hard way is because usually when people think about fat loss, and I draw on firsthand experience, actually even probably from myself and some people that are closest to me, people are always trying to find a shortcut. Mm-hmm. It's like, how can I lose, whether it's 20 pounds or 3 pounds or whatever you need to lose, how can I lose it as fast as I can in the simplest way as I can?
Yeah.
And I just love that you created this manual and you sort of did it, I would say, the old school. You know what? You just got to work out, you got to eat good, and I will help you go through it.
It's total old school. Total old school. That is the perfect way to describe it, because I remember when I had to, in my mind, develop this new way of eating, dieting. You probably don't remember it or ever heard of it, but there was the apple diet where you just ate red apples. That's all you did. And I thought, that's how I'm going to start the first day. I'm going to eat all red apples.
Is it on like day 5? The trick is you're going to hate the red apple so much that you will build into not eating at all. I wonder.
That I mentioned apples in my book.
Yeah.
I love apples for dieting because I don't like them enough where I'll eat more than one. Mm-hmm. Like grapes, I'll just eat pounds and pounds of grapes and nectarine after nectarine and, that sort of thing. But an apple, I'm good with one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's old school. It's counting calories. I mean, it's just calories in, calories out. Like Mark says, I don't make the rules. I just know them. I think the roadblock that a lot of people, I hate talking in those terms, a lot of people, because I don't know a lot of people. I just can speak for myself. And when I started to think about this interview and I started thinking about weight loss, I realized that when I stopped being a victim of being fat, it wasn't my fault, right? It was genetics or whatever. It was genetics, basically. And, life wasn't fair. And I'm never going to be thin, and I never was thin, and everybody else is thin and I'm not thin, and I don't really eat that much. And I was a victim of all of that. And that's why I know I'll never be fat again, is because I'll never be that victim again. I'll never be a victim. If I am fat, I'm taking responsibility for it. I'll tell you that. I was like, hey, I know why I'm fat, and a lot of people these days, I think, are better about that. They'll say, I know why I'm fat. So there you go. But it really changed for me. I decided I wasn't going to be a victim. And then the miracle that happened was I saw this body emerge that, oh my God, my hips were small. I had muscular shoulders. I had biceps. I had triceps. I didn't have any cellulite on my thighs. I'm like, what? How could this happen in my 40s? I've had it my entire life. So, wow, it is not genetics.
Yeah.
What I saw happen right in front of my eyes, I didn't even know existed. I didn't know that anybody could do that. Since then, that was back in 2005. Somebody losing 100 pounds or more, that was a big deal. And it's still a big deal. Yeah. The difference is there are so many more people 100 pounds overweight now than when I was 100 pounds overweight, and even a generation before that, 100 pounds overweight. Now, what is the average size of the American women's size? Maybe it's even bigger than 16 right now. Wow. I don't know what it is, but at the time it was size 16. So yeah, it wasn't genetics. I always thought I was a pear, by the way. I thought I was pear-shaped, And then I realized, I'm like, what? I have these really tiny hips and I don't really have a waist. So I'm not pear-shaped. It's just really interesting how you really can change your body.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think your transformation is a really amazing example of that. You touch base on so many things. I would love to go to the kettlebell and the efficiency of kettlebell, because especially in the book, you highlight so many things that I really didn't give much thought into and wasn't aware of. But maybe before we do, I think it might be really good. I've gotten a tip. So it's from Mark. And I asked him, what should I ask Tracy? And he said, you need to ask her, how did the book come to life? So maybe before we go too far, how did you bring this book into life?
That's a good question, actually. So kettlebell certifications around the 2000s, I was going to say the turn of the century. That sounds so weird. Kettlebell certifications were few and far between. Only one organization was really doing them. And they were a 3-day event to go be certified to teach kettlebells. And this 3-day event was like a big deal. It was like boot camp for 3 days. So after I lost the weight and I thought I was a badass, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go do these 3 days and show everybody I can do it. I wasn't really interested in becoming an instructor. Anyway, so I went, and then everybody heard I had lost 100 pounds and 120 at the time. And I started getting all this attention for this tremendous weight loss. That was pretty cool. So then I just started going to assisting at kettlebell certifications because Mark was a master instructor. And we were kind of like a kettlebell power couple, husband and wife, both training kettlebells. I had developed my own system, specifically using the swing. That's the first skill almost everybody learns with a kettlebell. And my whole thing is high volume. So for me to do 20 swings, as you know, Clara, because you've trained with me, back in the day, 20 was a lot, believe it or not. And I'd go to these certifications and the instructor would say, we're going to do 30 seconds of kettlebell swings. And everybody's like, oh, no. And I'm thinking, what? That's 20 swings. Come on, let's do it. Yeah. So I developed this style that has become known as high volume swing training. I guess, I don't know what year it was. It must have been around 2010. New York Times bestselling author Tim Ferriss, from the success of his 4-hour work week, was working on a book called The 4-Hour Body. I did not know who Tim Ferriss was, didn't really care. And he came to a certification to learn about kettlebells. So the 4-Hour Body is a book it's about hacks, life hacks, training hacks, eating hacks. So he wanted to write about the kettlebell swing because it's the most efficient. It's the biggest bang for your buck as far as exercise goes. If you want to do the littlest amount of work with the most potential for change, then the kettlebell swing is it. So he asked Pavel, do you know anybody who has done amazing things with this exercise? And of course, Pavel gave me the name, the queen of the kettlebell swing. So of course, he recommended me. So Tim Ferriss calls me and wants to do a interview with me over the phone. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I don't know, we spoke for hours and he was trying to kind of get me to tell him what my program was. And I didn't know who this guy was. I'm like, I'm not telling this guy my secrets. Forget it. I'm going to write my own book.
I love it.
I really wish I would have told him a little bit more. Because he has his own program in his book, which is fine. It's his book. It's a little bit different than mine, but that's okay. I think he interviewed 200 people for his book. And not only did he choose my story to feature in the 4-Hour Body, there's pictures of me in that book. And he used me in the video trailer to that book. So if any of your listeners have not seen the video trailer to the 4-Hour Body, is probably one of the most badass things I've ever been involved in to this day. So totally cool. And after that book came out, again, a New York Times bestselling book, and did some traveling and interviews with Tim. I can call him Tim.
Yeah.
His literary agent approached me about writing my own book. So I signed on with him, and then he got me the deal with Harper One. And within 6 months, the swing, Lose the Fat and Get Fit, was ready to go. So that's how the book came to be. After my book came out, a lot of people would approach me and say, how do you get a book published? And I'm like, I don't know, really. I was asked to write the book, and I did. One of the other questions I get now all the time is, when are you going to write another book? And for a long time, up until like maybe the last couple of days, I always said, there's no need to write another book because this book, like you said, is like a manual. Mm-hmm. And it's so good. It really is. It's simple. It's to the point. Hopefully it's a little inspirational. You don't need anything else. All of the workout videos are on YouTube for free.
Yes.
Nothing's changed about the kettlebell. Nothing has changed in the last 10 years about this training. Right. I do the same type of training to this day, multiple times a week.
Yeah.
As far as another book, I think it would be kind of interesting to kind of catch up what's happened since I wrote that book and now. And then, of course, I love the snatch, the kettlebell snatch, as much as I love the swing. So that would be another idea. But as far as another book, I just think this is a really good book. And I'm glad that you thought so too, because sometimes you forget. Sometimes you don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's not that good, but it is.
Yeah. And I do want to bring up what you sort of mentioned already, but I've been observing this trend of really the humanity. We're only getting bigger, right? Everywhere where you look at it in the past, probably even 100 years ago, perhaps the problem of malnourishment or lack of nourishment was more of that an issue. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're almost getting to a point where, sure, there are still areas that do not have enough food, but the reality is there is actually more food than we need.
Yeah.
And sometimes actually it's also a food waste. So it's a matter of the food is not being distributed correctly to where it's needed. So it's still overproduction overall. We just kind of throw away or waste more. And really, people are getting bigger. It's even me noticing when I go back to Czech Republic, because sometimes I feel like comparing the trends and where the diet is going is easier if you almost don't live in the country, because you can sort of step away and go back. Mm-hmm. I feel like even there in general, because people used to eat more naturally. And I think there's becoming some of the trends that I actually think America is trying to shake off now. Mm-hmm. Like when I see the industry going and what they're propagating, there's some positive trends that I see now versus, let's say, when I was in college. And even some of the diet that I thought didn't make that much sense, that was the low fat, and you just end up consuming so much crap that you don't actually even know.
Yeah.
But looking at that, I think the book is still relevant, or perhaps more relevant than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it gives people no excuse. If you want to change your life, be healthier, feel more energetic, be top of your shape, and I would argue adopt this athletic mindset as part of your life, read your book, The Swing, Lose the Fat, and Get Fit with this revolutionary kettlebell program.
Yeah, it's just one movement. You have to do something physical.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in walking. I talk about it in the book, and that's why my dog's name is Walker. It doesn't have to be kettlebells, but there's so many great reasons why it should be kettlebell, especially the swing.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Ferriss wasn't wrong. He was 100% right. It is the most efficient exercise that anybody can do in the shortest amount of time and get the biggest bang for their buck. Your muscles are moving. It makes you a more powerful athlete. It works your cardio, it works your strength, your stability. I mean, so many things. It's just all compacted into one. And there's a lot of reasons why it works that well. Because the bell is weighted, you have to add in the force of moving weight, the number of repetitions you do. The list goes on, and it's all in the book. But if it's not kettlebells, it still has to be something else. So, because you were talking about how people use excuses, for why they're not doing something, eating right or exercising. So, because of this modern lifestyle that we have, we're not working out in the fields or moving things or doing physical labor like we used to. So we have to do something. Our bodies were created to move.
Right.
They were created to move. So you have to move them. And if you don't move them, they become weak and sick and fat.
Yeah.
So as far as there being more food on the planet, I think another issue, if you want to use that word, is that food has become an affordable luxury.
Mm. Yes.
And I think that's as much of a problem as anything else. Because not only is it abundant, but it's affordable. I mean, to a certain degree, if you can't afford other luxuries, right?
Yes.
And food has become so luxurious. I mean, all the labels that we put on it, organic, locally raised, farm, whatever.
Yes.
All of these lovely words that companies tack onto their foods to make us think that we're getting a high quality product. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. But it makes a person feel good when they own something. When you buy a chocolate eclair from, the high-end patisserie and it's $4, you own that. And you're like, well, look at what I own. And it's cool. It's fun.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to have nice things in their life? So I think that's as much of it is overeating as anything. One, we have the food available to us, and two, it's affordable.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how much an apple costs these days. Speaking of Apple, I mean, usually I don't really pay attention to what every individual thing costs at the market. But I think I had to buy an apple. I was on the road somewhere and I was hungry and I just stopped into a store and I'm like, and I just want an apple. That'll get me through whatever. It was like $2.
Wow.
I'm like,
one apple.
What? I wasn't at Trader Joe's. Yeah. I was at some other gourmet market, but I'm like, really? So wonder people are buying a packet of Ho-Hos for 99 cents. Quick energy. So that argument's been out there for a while, but back to athletic mindset. My last blog was titled Training, Food, and Thought. Mm-hmm. So you could look at it as three different words. Training, it's about training, and it's about food, and it's about thought, right? Because we both know that your mindset, right, has a lot to do with your success in achieving certain goals or whatever. But it was really about training food and training thought.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that habit, right? Establishing a habit of thinking a certain way. So when we're training our bodies, that's pretty black and white. You go into the gym, you have a routine, you do your sets and reps. That's training. But training your food, okay, well, you've got to get in the habit of cutting your onion and shredding your cabbage and packaging your lunch up for the day. That's training the way you eat and prepare your foods. Training thought. Okay, what are my destructive thoughts? Am I playing the victim? Am I, you know what I'm saying? Like it's, you've got to change the way you think about things. Just like when I realized that I wasn't fat because of genetics. Do you know how many people hide behind that to this day? It's just genetics. It's just genetics. Nothing I can do is going to change it. Well, certainly there are certain things that are not going to change your blue eyes to brown or your thick ankles to thin or, your crooked toe to a straight toe. Certainly there are things that are genetics, but the shape of your body, you can absolutely change. The size of your body, you can absolutely change. And the way you think about it, you can absolutely change. Certainly, I guess the way of thinking can be genetic when you grow up in a family and the family thinks a certain way. But, you can break out of that. You have your own mind. So it is about training thought as much as it is about training your body, training your food. It's all training. It's all a progression. It's all trackable. It's all measurable. It's just all a game.
Yes.
I guess that's how it relates to tennis and any other sport game, right?
It's a personal journey because even if I compare what you just said to me and I reflect on my own food journey, I've been iterating probably on how I eat and what I eat the past about 7-8 years. I've put in a lot of effort thinking about the food or the food that I eat and the cleanliness of the nutrients and the ingredients. And actually, the more I get on this journey, the cleaner it gets and the simpler it gets. I mean, there's some positives and negatives. In a way, I actually have to watch myself not to take things into extremes because sometimes that can go almost the wrong way. So I have a tendency to commit to such a degree that everything else becomes an enemy in a world where you're not productive either, or it's not a good mindset to be. So I need to think about how to keep space for fun.
Sure.
But it definitely just once you get on this journey, I think what I'm trying to say, not very eloquently, is once you get on a journey, you start simple. And as you get on, it will naturally seem to, at least it did for me, and I'm almost hearing for you as well, and the way you read it in the book, to wanting more of it. And it just naturally starts being simpler and just natural to cleaning up your things in life towards your goals and lead you that way.
Yeah. I like the word simple a lot. I'm not really a fan of the word clean because that's really judgy to me because I had a blog for a number of years. God, there's so many great things that I wrote on that blog, but there was one post that I wrote about. So when I started this diet, we didn't have a lot of money. I mean, we didn't not have a lot of money, but you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like, I looked at how much an apple cost back in the day. So we lived here, where we live in downtown. And there was the market before they started building that halfway house. That market was a Vietnamese market. And I don't know where their produce comes from. I don't know where they get their meat or whatever, but they were inexpensive. Really inexpensive. And I would pull in there and I'd buy all my vegetables for the week and inexpensive meats and that sort of thing. And then I started thinking about, well, maybe I should buy organic. So I started going to farmers markets and buying everything organic. Man, that was stressful. Ever since I've had Walker, I make chicken stock every week, almost more than once a week because we eat so much of it. But that was something that I also used to do, is make chicken stock, because I made my own soups. And then I started getting like, oh, I can't make stock out of that chicken from the Vietnamese store. Nothing against Vietnamese. It wasn't an organic store. Let's put it that way. It could have been any market. So I'm like leaching nutrients out of bad bones, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I can't eat that. What do they say? Overanalyzation causes paralyzation or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not even a word.
Yeah.
So I try not to get too hung up about it. Everybody has to eat what they feel good about eating. If you can't feel good about eating it, then forget it.
Yes.
It's not going to do you any good if you can't feel good about it.
Yeah.
That goes for a cookie. If you can't feel good about that cookie's not doing any good for you.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with that. I think for me, it just evolved naturally. I've actually found a way to make it very simple for me, because we just order, especially meat. I'm really a big fan of regenerative farming.
Yeah.
Not only for the quality of meat, but also for sustainability and just the quality of the earth, I guess you would say. There's actually people are so much against beef now and mass-produced farms and pig farms. A number of stories people probably have heard about it, but just the regenerative type of farming, it just makes sense to me when I read it.
Yeah.
And so when I'm thinking, I guess I have sufficient amount of money that I decide to invest in the meat for myself. And it's just simple in a way that I just order it and it comes to my house. I put it in a freezer, and it simplifies my cooking then, because I don't even have to go to the store to think about what I'm getting. I'm just going to get one of the things I'm pre-ordered and go into my natural menu. Also, another thing is looking at the ingredients is first thing that I started doing when there's too many things that I just don't have idea about. I was like, this word, I don't even know what this word means, and then you see 10 other words on this package like that you can't even read almost. It's like, this thing is probably not very good for you. You may rather just go buy an apple, to your point, or some other ingredient that, there's just specific things in it. And then it comes from the planet that's growing either veggie, fruit, or meat produce.
I'll tell you, the education I got through taking on a calorie counting diet, by flipping over and reading all of the information that's on the label. It's not just the calories, which are super important, and serving size, but there's so much other information. And like anything else you do regularly and for a long time, you just start to know it's second nature. You just know it, right? So the education I got on knowing what I was eating, once you know something, you can't unknow it, right? So that's why I said, if I'm ever fat again, I'll know why. So super important. Simple, unprocessed, home cooked. Now you can buy so many good foods pre-made. You can go to nice markets that have meals that are made with quality foods, if that's important and you can afford it.
Yes.
But when I wrote the book, that wasn't as abundant as it is now. I was a big proponent of home cooking.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I've never said this before, so I'm going to say it now. My book is in thirds, right? It's my story and how I came to the kettlebell and the kettlebell swing. And then it's about the kettlebell swing. And then it's about my diet. And I have never really read the last part of my book more than a couple of times since I've written it. Until recently, thanks to you, Clara, because you mentioned that you were reading it. And I almost tried to stop you from reading it. You said, oh, I'm on the diet portion. I'm like, oh, no. You don't need to read that.
Yeah, you actually did say that. I was like, oh, this is going to be pretty quick for you. Like, you could just skim through it. I was like, no, I've committed. I'm going to read every single word in this book because first I want to learn about you. And actually, it's a fantastic book. So
I thought, I know I'm doing this interview. I think I better read that. And it's good. There is some good information in that portion of the book. I mean, there's good common sense, Tracy's food rule, number 7 or whatever it is. There's some good ideas. And I'm looking at all these recipes and they are totally foods that I ate at the time. Most of them I still eat. A couple of them I forgot about. And I'm like, live trail mix? Oh yeah, that's right. I used to eat that. That is really delicious. I might have to make myself some. I thought that was funny. So Thank you for motivating me to read my book.
Well, you're welcome. And I'm glad you did, because I think more people should. But I actually love what you mentioned about your blog and how you name it Training, Food, and Thought. And I actually see it that way. And the way I thought about talking to you, it actually really fits those 3 categories. So we're talking about food. Maybe we can dive into the middle one. And for the purpose of listeners, I actually would love you to share a little bit of the story of where you come from. Because when you told me the story of how you grew up, it was so not natural for me. It was almost like a movie coming from Czech Republic, because we grew up in almost a different era, right? The communist era sort of shifted the development of the country back. So I would say comparing the era I grew up in Czech Republic doesn't really fit the era of the people, I would say, in the US, because US was in a very different state at the time. So it's funny, I always laugh, but I feel like I fit in with a different generation within America, because like the people in my age have a very different upbringing, or the ones who grew up in the US than I had when I was growing up in Czech. So maybe you can start describing a little bit of what your childhood is and your view of how food is brought to you, to describe sort of the journey. And I loved in the book, you actually described even the focus on chopping vegetable and just basics. So any tips for how people may want to transition to that, I think would be fantastic, because I can imagine, a lot of people grew up in the same type of environment.
Right. I grew up in the 60s and 70s with processed foods. So my mother didn't do any home cooking. Everything came out of a box or a can or a package of hot dogs. I guess that's not a box or a can, but you open up a package, you heat it up and you eat it. I didn't have grandparents that, were old school, that, had a vegetable garden and grew things and cooked. So as a young adult, of course, I knew how to cook a hot dog. Maybe the classic macaroni and cheese or whatever. And I didn't know it at the time, but once I did learn how to cook, and I'll tell you that story, I look back on it and I was embarrassed that I was starting a family, 2 small children, and I didn't really know how to nourish them correctly. I think a lot of people are still kind of living that way because processed foods have just gotten even more abundant.
Yes.
But the introduction of fresh foods has come into play. And about a decade ago, now we have celebrity chefs, right? Chefs are like rock stars now.
Yes.
So I always wanted to learn how to cook. When I took my first cooking lesson, I signed up for a series of cooking classes. Mark bought them for me for my 32nd birthday. So I was 32 years old and I didn't know how to cook. So it was a series of 12 brilliant series of cooking classes that, again, a progression starts with stocks and broths and built up to, I don't know what it was. But at the time, I remember one class, we were going to make pork tenderloin. And I had never even seen a pork tenderloin. I was 32 years old. And I'm like, what is a pork tenderloin? I had seen ground beef. I had seen a steak. Probably never cooked a steak, to be honest with you. So yeah, I learned how to cook when I was 32. And I look back and I go, wow, I really didn't know anything about anything. But from that point on, I just dove in deep, right? Then it was all about gourmet food, which also isn't really diet food. but it was the high fat butter and all the fancy sauces and all that other stuff. So I practiced gourmet cooking for a number of years, 10 years, because I was 42 when I started this diet. So I had gotten a lot of practice as chopping a lot of vegetables. I mean, when you cook really fancy dishes, you got to chop a lot of stuff. But it's really interesting because now if somebody tells me that they do not have an onion or a lemon in their house right now, right this minute, I know that they do not cook. You can't possibly cook anything if you don't always have an onion or always have a lemon in your house. Do you have an onion and a lemon in your house, Clara?
Actually, I was going to admit we don't have an onion. But the reason I dropped onion, actually, it's funny. When I was reading your story in your book, it actually reminded me how delicious onion is.
Right.
And the reason why we dropped it is because of Ali.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
As you know, Ali eats with us.
Yes.
And so I try to not put any foods that it would be risky for her.
There you go.
So we made the sacrifice of not cooking with onion. Yeah, but your book actually made me miss it because there's some amazing flavors you can get with onion.
Yeah, so I just got a lot of practice at prepping food. So when it was time for me to start this diet, I decided to turn my hobby into something that was going to benefit me in more ways than I could ever imagine. So I already had a lot of skills, kitchen skills, when I started my diet. And it came in handy for sure. But if you never practice, you never get better at it. So one of the things that I completely 100% turned on a dime was I never ate out once I started my diet. I never ate out. I didn't eat out at a restaurant. Well, fast food is what got me fat in the first place. It was delicious at the time. It's not delicious to me anymore. I can't eat it at all because it assaults me, to be honest with you. I'm not assaulted by a pint of Haagen-Dazs, but I am assaulted by a McDonald's cheeseburger. You know, I'm not assaulted by a chocolate chip cookie, but those savory meals from fast food restaurants just really are so high in fat and salt. I can't eat them. So I didn't eat out at all for 2.5 years. And when I finally ate out, it was because I was traveling somewhere and I had to eat out. And even then, maybe for another 2 years, it was very few and far between did I eat food that I didn't cook myself.
Yeah.
You know, I still, Mark and I don't go out to eat. Like you and Trevor, you make your food at home.
Yeah.
So to come from 32 years of not knowing what a pork tenderloin was to making all of my own food now because of Walker, making dog food.
Yes.
I mean, you knew I had to go there. You knew I had to go there. So things change.
Yes.
Things change. It's really interesting. So,
and I guess maybe what stood out to me when reading the book and your story and what I'm getting from the example is just amazing transformation on all fronts. Because going back to where we started, there's no excuses. I was like, if you can do it, and a person who's gone completely from just used to eating fast food and things from cans, because that's how you grew up and that was quick and easy and accessible, to being this gourmet chef. And I have been privileged to be one of the friends who's received some of your amazing baking goods with sourdough and amazing art cookies that you make. I see that you have this amazing talent and passion for food that you've sort of transformed to understanding the nutrients, the ingredients, and actually creating something amazing that you give out to your family, but also friends, and in such a way that obviously nourishes people.
Yeah.
And it was just an amazing transformation. And the way you write about it in the book again, and I loved how you started with cutting onion. It was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. You got to start with the basics.
Yeah. I love food. You know what? I think that's another thing that I want people to understand. If there's anybody listening that has, I don't like the word struggle, but feels like they have struggled with weight, And since I lost 120 pounds, I have eaten a half of a pizza and more. So it's not like it's the end of your life. Of course, I don't eat pizza now because it's not made with my bread. But what I'm saying is people think that they can never eat the way they eat now on a regular basis, but you can inject those eating binges, if that's what you want to call it, because I don't think that that's a bad thing. So I had a client that, went on a super strict diet, and she said, oh, I only ate half a can of tuna with my salad. I go, you can eat the whole can.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to eat a half a can of tuna. So I think there's this misconception that 1,500 calories is very little food. And it's not. It can be a lot of food.
Yes.
I mean, if that's your thing, right. Not everybody likes a lot of food, but if you're overweight and significantly overweight, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess you like eating a lot of food. The days of eating a lot of food aren't completely over, but you'll feel differently about them and the type of food that you overeat. Because I still can overeat a salad.
Yeah. One thing I do want to touch on that you just reminded me with the comment, and actually somebody else posted on one of my social media about cheat days. And your book made me think about it because you write about it, whether to implement a cheat day or not. And you sort of talk about the difference of cheat day versus cheat meal. It is something that I've contemplated myself on, and I've sort of gotten back and forth on it. I don't know if I have a full conclusion. I sort of know what works for me, but I love how you write about it in the book. Would you want to describe your experience and any recommendations for people, how to navigate it? Should I have a cheat day, or how do they want to experiment with it in their life?
So you have to understand that most of the people that my story resonates with are people that are 100 pounds and more overweight. When I make suggestions or talk about dieting, it's really not to the person that has 5 or 10 pounds to lose. So what I know about being extremely overweight is if somebody tells me I can have a cheat day, oh, it's on. I'm going to have a cheat day. So one, again, training food and thought. Your thought, you have to have a mental break sometimes from... Sometimes we can get too serious about things, or we can get too, like a half a can of tuna. So you just have to spike your calories to keep your body from getting used to a set point of low calories. Super important if you're not exercising simultaneously with dieting, which most people, that's what they do. They go on a diet and they don't commit time for daily exercise. Certainly not muscle building exercise. Because what are people doing to build muscle? What are they doing? If you're an overweight person that's 100 pounds overweight, or even 50, maybe even 40, and you're going to go to the gym, even with COVID and everything. So you're going to go to the gym. What are you going to do at the gym? You're going to do traditional weight resistance exercises, bodybuilding exercises, maybe some machines. It's not going to build muscle fast enough to make you happy at all. That's why kettlebells are so amazing. But I'm just saying about the average person. The average person is going to go on a diet before they exercise. Maybe they'll walk on a regular basis, but what are they going to do? They're going to try boot camp, but 50 pounds overweight, that's not going to work. Maybe they'll try kickboxing. That's horrible. So, I mean, when you're overweight like that, right? So a cheat day, if you just go on a diet and you cut your calories super low and you don't have some mental relief from it and some physical calorie spiking relief from it, then yes, you are in danger of hitting a plateau. Now, I personally never hit a plateau. I went from 254 pounds, blew through a couple of goal weights. 200 was my first one. 175 was my next one. 142 was my next one. 132 was my ending one. And I even got below that. Never hit a plateau. Why? Kettlebells. That's why. because I was building muscle and burning fat simultaneously and dieting. That's why I never hit a plateau. I'm 100% convinced of it. But if you're not introducing regular exercise that's not muscle building and fat burning, and you're only dieting, then the cheat hour, 2-hour cheat meal is more important than anything, because your body will adapt to a certain level of calories and your weight loss will be slower.
Yeah.
So you see, it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just want to give a little bit more clarity on that.
Yeah, but I do love that you mentioned it and made me reflect on my own experiences, because I've contemplated about this specific thing a lot. And I also resonate with the quote, it's easier to be 100% accurate than 99% accurate. Because again, from the perspective of systemizing for me, like everything I can automate and systemize and not think about, then it's easier. So if I don't have to think about even cheat days or what can I have for cheat day or cheat meal, like that again goes to my automation. On the contrary side, actually, when I even reflect on my keto journey, and we were super strict keto for about a year, I sort of hit a plateau. Like it drastically starts improving. I felt great, very fit. I got great tone. I respond very well to keto. But at some point, I would say maybe 7-8 months through, I sort of felt like I hit a plateau. And then it actually restarted when I go on vacation. And usually when I go on vacation, I cheat. I sort of eat whatever. I don't think about it. Vacation, I go all out. And I don't count what I eat or how much I eat. And then I come back. I actually sometimes surprised that I lose weight.
Right.
So I was like, what? It restarts the body. That's what your cheat days actually made me think about, the importance of having off day to throw the body off so it doesn't get just used to that minimum take or very strict diet, but just to keep it guessing. I could, even from experience, sense the importance of that.
Yeah.
And especially probably important when you're on a journey trying to lose weight. But going back to your comment, because I think that was perfect sequel to the kettlebells. And first, the training. Even after reading your book, I didn't think how amazing tool that is. And after reading it, I totally understand how it can be amazing for any weight loss journey, or actually really any athlete or athlete, I would say recovering athlete like myself, who's had a lot of injuries. And so as a tool to stay fit, have a muscle tone, an amazing tool that I can work on, obviously a lot of different things. But tell our listeners more about why the kettlebell and what are some of the principles for training you would recommend.
The foundation of kettlebell training, which very few people do, by the way. If you've picked up a kettlebell, it's a cast iron weight ball with a handle on it, and you've done a bicep curl with it, that's not training kettlebells. That's doing a bicep curl with a kettlebell. So there are 6 basic true kettlebell training movements. The foundation of them all pretty much is the kettlebell swing. So done correctly, because the bell is in motion, your body is always working. Once you hike that bell back behind you and you get that bell in motion, the body never rests. So you're either producing force, reducing force, or redirecting the force of this moving weight. So your body is working all the time. Whereas, so I'll give you an example. If you were to do a 50-pound deadlift, right? You stand over the weight and you deadlift 50 pounds 10 times. You've just moved, 500 pounds? Is that 50 times 10? But if you were to swing a 50-pound kettlebell, which no beginner is going to swing a 50-pound kettlebell, but it's really not as difficult as it sounds. But if you were to swing a 50-pound kettlebell 10 times, you would have to add the forces that are happening to your body while you are moving that bell back and forth. And it multiplies the amount of work your body's doing. So that's what's so magical about the kettlebell, is because we're able to move more weight than we can lift. Our body is getting all the benefits as if we were lifting that amount of weight. So I like to use the analogy of moving a dresser. You've just moved, Claire, so you might know, you can relate to this.
And I have a good memory about moving a 500-pound dresser.
Moving a dresser across the room. So you're not going to lift the dresser. You can't lift the dresser, but you can move the dresser. So that's what kettlebell swing is. You're moving weight. You're not lifting weight. You're moving it. And you can move a lot more weight than you can lift. And the benefits to your body are amazing. So if you can imagine, maybe not that dresser that you have downstairs, like a normal person's dresser, you can imagine. If you were to move it back and forth across the room 10 times, you'd probably work up a sweat.
Yeah.
And you'd probably be sore the next day.
Yeah.
So you don't have to lift something and still do weight resistance exercise and still build muscle without lifting. You can be moving weight, not lifting it. And that's what the kettlebell swing and the snatch and some other kettlebell movements are about, is moving weight instead of lifting. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that was fantastic. And you beautifully describe it in the book about the efficiency and effectiveness of it, which made me think, who wouldn't want an effective workout? Like that's, nobody has extra time, right? If you want something effective, that's it. It also made me think about, I guess I'm stigmatizing women, but what I feel like women, or at least the generation and the upbringing I had, it used to be always the women, oh, if you want to lose weight, you just go for a run. And you start running and you start doing more cardio. That's sort of where I grew up, the mindset.
Yeah.
And I actually disagree with it. You also read in the book why running is not that efficient and kettlebell sort of works.
Yeah.
But also as you grow older, and I think that's why, especially as you grow older, if you want to be fit, there should be probably more consideration, and especially as a woman, because I see it, most men, I'm categorizing again, but on average, they're more prone to actually lifting or creating muscle. I think women naturally more lean towards the endurance and running type of workouts, elliptical and stuff, which is actually contradictory because we lose more muscle as we age.
Yeah.
And so especially as we age, we need to be more mindful about how we structure our training and adding weightlifting as part of that program even more. And perhaps even if you're a runner, maybe you need to consider as you age cutting down on the miles you run and adding other types of workout. And to that, the kettlebell can be a fantastic complement. And really, I say that because it's from my own experience, something I had to do just by a result of even my own injuries.
The kettlebell is an amazing accompanying exercise if you're a runner. But since you mentioned being a runner, let's define that a little bit. So most people are joggers. They're not runners. And okay. So most people think, oh, I'm going to go run. What they really mean is jog, because nobody's running. Because if you look at a runner, you know they're a runner. Mark says, I don't know if I quoted him in the book, but he says something that I love. It goes back to being a runner. You don't run to get in shape. You get in shape to run. My point is that most people are not runners, so they shouldn't be running. And jogging is not that good for you at all. So don't jog.
Yeah.
To get in shape.
I love judging runners for a reason.
Joggers, you mean, or
joggers? Yeah. I sort of look at a person, I was like, this person knows how to run, and the other one, oh, poor person, nobody taught them how to run. Maybe they should pick something else, because you can see their technique. They're getting more damage than good for themselves by their running posture. When you see the movement, you can almost naturally, or I can see, and I don't know if everybody can, but I don't know if the athletic world sort of primed me to that. I can see whether the run or jog is efficient or not, and whether they're hurting their body or helping it by the jogging.
You know what surprises me, though? You mentioned it could be a generational thing. I see people that should not be taking up jogging of all ages take up jogging.
Yes.
I don't think it's a generational thing. It's this myth that has just been perpetuated generation through generation. I am just as amazed seeing, and they're usually overweight joggers because that's how they're trying to lose weight. But I see people with white hair, old people jogging. Yeah. I'm like, wow, newsflash. I don't know. I know we're being super judgy here. Maybe I have to cut this whole part out. Save it for bloopers edition.
I mean, I guess it's natural. If you see a movement that's not fluid or smooth, I mean, there's definitely risk of injury. And so the older I get, and again, to your point, the older people I see, I think health is the really one thing that I connect with more and more, and valuing being injury-free. Being injury-free is so important for me.
Yeah.
I have that top of mind, like efficiency of movement and creating the right movements. But maybe sequel to actually losing the judgment and to the last pillar of what you mentioned, training your thought. Mm-hmm. And I actually think you described it in the book perfectly. And just my own journey of being an athlete. And I would say I've struggled with weight. Who doesn't in the past? Maybe not that I was ever 100 pounds overweight, but you know, you can be unhappy whether you have extra 5 pounds and you're an athlete or whether you're 20. I think it's all relative. It depends on the person. Absolutely. And I do have to say how beautifully you actually wrote in the book about reconnecting with yourself and losing judgment about yourself and really appreciating the body for what it can do. And imagine it. And when I remember reading the book, you visualize yourself walking and how your body is getting stronger and healthier and more powerful.
Absolutely. I tell that story to this day because I think when I wrote the book, I didn't even realize it, how powerful that visualization was. It wasn't until I actually read a book on visualization that the author described a young boy that had asthma, and he saw a doctor that helped him visualize little workers in his lungs filling up buckets of tar and throwing them out the window, and how once he could see that happening in his body, he started to breathe easier. And I thought, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. I was walking and I was talking to my heart. Mm-hmm. And I was telling my heart, I've got your back. I'm going to do this for you. We're doing this together. I'm going to melt the fat from around you. And I told my heart that every time I went out for a walk, I was literally melting the fat around my heart. And that's exactly what happened. So that light bulb went off and I'm like, oh my God, I was doing it and I didn't even know I was doing it. I do think certainly if you know about visualization, then you can start to implement it. I wish I probably did it more than I do now, but it's very powerful, very powerful.
Yeah. We've certainly done a lot in tennis. I've had visualization even during matches or before I play a point, or at night I would do visualizations before I fall asleep. But I was curious whether it came natural to you. You answered the question before I asked it. It sort of seemed like you naturally felt like you have to do it. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, the whole weight loss thing happened because I'm not sure if I talk about it in the book, but I watched this program. I think it was a Dr. Oz way back before he was who he is now. And he worked with another doctor. So they were all about the heart, right? And they had a tub of water and they submerged a bath towel in the water. And they brought it out of the water and they tried to wring out the water. And how hard it was, if you can imagine, right? Wringing out water from a bath towel. Mm-hmm. And because I always thought, well, if the heart is a muscle and it's big, it's just better, right? And so this bath towel represents a big heart, an enlarged heart, and how hard it has to work to pump the blood through it. It's like wringing out the water from it. So then they took a washcloth, 12 by 12 inch square of cloth, and they got it wet. and they wrung out the water nice and strong. And that really did it for me.
Mm.
That visual right there of how hard my heart was working and when it didn't need to work that hard. And I'm like, I'm doing this to myself. So that was the promise I made to my heart on those walks, that I was going to make my heart's life easier.
Oh.
And I was doing it every step I took.
I love that. And you also write about the importance of self-love, self-respect, and confidence. And I find it really important when creating any long-term sustainable change, but even just reflecting on what I've shared a little bit, my own journey. And again, I'm saying it's relative, right? But when I reflect back, the times when I really gained weight was typically the times when I didn't appreciate my body. It was typically also times when I may have been injured, and it's just so hard being an athlete and being injured. So you sort of hate almost the body for why it's not in the shape you want it to be.
Right.
And so that goes to the opposite. And so if there's a key thing that I've also learned is if you want to be, I would say, the best self you can, or whatever habit you're trying to change, pushing yourself down is actually working against you.
Yeah.
So I love your story and just the natural way you say about it, and including being selfish.
Yeah.
So I want to touch base on that because I think this can be big, especially for many moms. I'm not a mom, but I do have a mom, and I've seen how hard it is for her after raising two crazy daughters and being so busy. Even to this day, she just can't figure out how to put herself first and prioritize herself. And again, I know I'm stereotyping. I'm sure there's a lot of men that may have the same problem, but just from drawing on experience and the girlfriends I have, it seems to be quite similar, like creating time and space for moms and themselves.
Yeah. I think it all comes down to reinforcers. This whole dog journey for me, learning about behavior. I think that when you have a person that's constantly doing for other people before themselves, they are reinforced for that behavior. They're reinforced by people saying, oh, you're such a good person, or, oh, you work so hard, and, oh, you're so giving, and you're always doing for others. That's reinforcement to them that they're good. So if people didn't appreciate or tell them how good they were for how good they are, they wouldn't do it as much. Nobody gets complimented for thinking of themselves first. But here's the thing. If you feel good about yourself, then you automatically make other people feel good around you. It's not about being conceited. It's about that confidence. You don't have to look to others to tell you you're good. Yes. You know you're good. I do talk about that in the book, about knowing how special I am, how special every one of us is, unique and special. If you don't own that, then that's a big loss, because when you know that about yourself, then you know that about others. Like, you don't have to do for others. It's like, give a man a fish or teach them how to fish, right? You help others do for themselves.
Yes.
Than doing for them. So that's why I'm always like, oh, I'll teach you how to do it. I won't do it for you, but I'm more than happy to teach you how to do it. I think that's where that comes from. And I think once you start to feel like you have some control in certain areas of your life, like, I can control my, what I write down in my food journal. I can control my workouts. I can control, my hobbies. I mean, not control is not a really good word, but I have a plan. I have a routine. I have these habits that support regularity and something I can count on. So I think that gives a person confidence and reminds them that they don't have to get it through doing for others so much. I don't know. That's just my opinion about it, but
I like it.
Why do people do so much for others and they don't do for themselves? Because they're somehow finding that reinforcement for that type of behavior. Read a dog training book. When you're reinforced for something, you do it again and you do it again and you do it again. It's like if you're always saying yes to people, right? Can you do this for me? Yeah, I'll do it. Can you do this for me? Yeah, I'll do it. Who are they going to call when they need something done? You.
Right.
If you say, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. You think they're going to call you? No, they're going to stop calling you.
Yeah.
So,
I actually do resonate with that a lot, obviously, just from my own experience. I think doing something for others makes us feel good, and it's kind of easy to justify, right? So to your point, somebody else needs it. And especially I can see if it's family, parents, again, example, mom will most likely prioritize the kids because it's easy to explain why she wants to take care of them.
It depends on what you're doing for them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It depends on what you're doing. Of course, I'm not saying don't do anything for anybody.
Right.
I'm just saying, what is it that you're doing?
Yes.
If you're taking away from yourself, when you feel good about yourself, then you can help others so much more.
Yes. It's like the saying, put your own oxygen mask first and then help others.
Yeah.
Actually, for the longest time, didn't understand that. I was like, what? I don't need any oxygen mask. I have enough energy. I can run around, make sure everybody has their oxygen mask on while I'm holding my breath. And then I'm going to sit down and put my mask on. I'll be okay. And then it really took me a number of, years, I think, growing up when I realized,
Yeah.
But when you put your own oxygen mask first, then you're not in the rush and you can actually walk around, make sure everybody's still okay while you're safe.
Yeah.
And you probably do it in much calmer and like a nicer and respectable way without causing the panic of running around the plane like a crazy person and trying to make sure everybody has their mask on first. So just from my own experience, I've done that before with work. And I would say it's the easy way. Right. Learning how to say no and when to say no is a big part for all of us. And I was at one stage of my life when I just prioritized work over any of my other personal goals. And so figuring out and drawing a line that, no, I'm not going to do this. And I am as important in my own personal goals as my work goals, if not more. And elevating those above has been part of my personal journey that definitely helped me grow. We covered a lot of topics that I've had in mind. One question I have written down here, what would be the 1 to 3 things that you would suggest people should focus on when it comes to improving diet and health, and how would you guide them through it?
That is a big question because so I'm going to talk about weight loss diet. So I've been giving this a lot of thought lately. And I think so many times, if you read an article about dieting, it's all about tips, right? Seriously, if we had a penny for every diet tip, right? It's just off the charts. There's so many diet tips. And guess what? They all work if you're in the right mindset. So it's not about tips. If I knew how to get somebody in the right mindset, I would be rich beyond my dreams. I only know hopefully how to get myself into that mindset, right? But it is a mindset. And one of the things that's helped me recently is that when you and I started talking about this interview for this podcast, you had mentioned how I write in my book about the readiness zone, right? Being in the right zone. And I started thinking about that because I haven't been in the zone. I haven't been in the diet zone for a while. And which was fine because I've been in other zones. It's cool.
Yes.
But I started thinking about it. And as I started getting into Walker's diet zone, my dog, and started to journal his food every day. Like I'm good at that, right? And I started to think about what I eat every day and how unbalanced it was. I'm like, oh, I haven't even been in my own zone. And I'm like, what is the zone? It's different than flow. And how I describe it is when you're in the zone, whatever zone it is, but especially the diet zone, there's a drive. And I like that word drive because I like that feeling of being driven. I love it. I love it. That's what gets me out of bed to bake bread at 3:45 in the morning. That's what makes me grind up chicken wings for my dog. That's what gets me to snatch a kettlebell for 10 minutes straight. That drive. It's such a good feeling.
Yeah.
That's where you need to be. And how you get there, I don't know. I can give you all kinds of suggestions, but I think it comes from being inspired. I think inspiration comes before motivation because inspiration takes no effort. Motivation takes effort. You have to do something. So I was inspired by my dog.
Yes, I love it. Walker is such an inspiration, by the way. I love him too. And so does Allie. She loves playing with him.
When I started this first diet in 2005, I was inspired by this bet. I was going to prove a point. I was driven. I was going to do it. I don't know what drives other people. I don't know if somebody could possibly just sit down, close their eyes, and remember back to a time when they felt that drive for anything. It doesn't have to be diet. It could be anything in your life that you felt, I'm going to do this. And you did. And you did. And what did that feel like?
Yeah.
So that would be my tip, is to focus, meditate, think about, feel that emotion of drive. I'm in that zone right now and I'm loving it. I get up every morning and I have my binder and I fold the page in half and I write Walker's name on one half and I write Tracy's name on the other half. And I plan it all out and I got my little calculator.
Love it.
It's so much fun. And if you can't have fun, it's a game, right? We talked about it being a game. And you got to have fun and you got to be light about it. And you got to figure out your strategy and you got to see the patterns and you got to look for the openings and you got to, all that. It's not that serious. We came here to experience the good and the bad and the good. And it's all meant to help us grow and expand and experience and share and give and take and all of that stuff.
Wow.
Way far away from the swing, lose the fat and get fit, but it's not, right? It's all the same.
I think it's fantastic because as you were describing it, I literally closed my eyes and I was imagining being in that drive and listening to you. I actually want to read this. One of the practices I have this book on my desk from Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese Buddhist. And this came into mind. It's a short story that he says, the ever-changing body. I just opened it this morning, literally. And you now talking about it almost, or what I hear you talking about it. So I'll read it briefly. We need to learn to see our physical form as a river. Our body is not a static thing. It changes all the time. It is very important to see our physical form as something impermanent, as a river that is constantly changing. Every cell in our body is a drop of water in that river. Birth and death are happening continuously in every moment of our daily life. We must live every moment with death and life present at the same time. Both death and life are happening at every instant in the river of our physical body. We should train ourselves in this vision of impermanence.
Love it.
I think how I see it is the drive is maybe we can't be always wired 100%, but like realizing this ebbs and flows, and as we go through life, sort of reconnecting. And when you talk about drive, for me, I love the connection to inspiration. Actually, something I've also creating as I grow older is creating time for inspiration and what inspires me. Knowing your purpose and knowing your why, understanding your meaning. I think all of these can be interchangeable, or at least for me, because I think it really is what we connect with the most. And just keeping that in mind.
Yeah.
Actually, this was sometime in the summer. I was dragging a sled. We were doing a street workout, dragging a sled with probably 80 pounds on it on the street, and it was super hot. And I was like, why am I doing this? It's like, it reminded me all the years of me chasing a tennis ball and other things that come with it. And it made me think, how did I do all of these things before? You know, why did I wake up every morning and just did that? And really the easy answer was that I knew why I was doing it every morning. I just didn't have a question of why. Well, I'm sure I didn't feel like it, but you just don't have an option. You sort of get up and you have a goal and you know why you do it. And so I love your book again. I love your readiness and drive and inspiration. And
thank
you know, maybe my top 3 things is buy Tracy's book, follow Tracy on YouTube for free videos. And where can people find you, Tracy? What's the best way to reach out to you?
I have a YouTube channel. It's pretty cool. I've got hundreds and hundreds of videos there of my own personal workouts, as well as some tutorials and that sort of thing. Of course, you know, my book. You know, my Instagram page is full of bread and dogs.
Love it.
And my Facebook page is bread and dogs. So I have a business. It's called Swing Lean. It's a subscription service, and I post 4 new and original swing-only videos 4 times a month. And you can find that on Gumroad, GUMROAD.com, Tracy Riff's Swing Lean program. Swing Lean is one word. So if you're interested in training, there's where you'll find it.
Amazing. I'll add those things into the show notes.
Thank you.
And maybe before we finish, what are you most optimistic about as you now look ahead and we hopefully are diving away from the craziness of the past 2 years?
Yeah. I am really excited these days. I don't know that I can pinpoint it because I'm open to things happening that I thought I couldn't imagine. So that being said, I am just going to ride it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm ready. Bring it.
Amazing. Tracy, thank you so much. And last but not least, I know your book is available on Amazon. I'll also add that to the episode show notes. It's available in Kindle, paper, and hardcover. I'll add the links to your YouTube as well.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate and value our friendship. You and Walker and Mark, not in any of those orders, but sort of.
I miss you guys. I miss you being around the corner. I'm bummed, but at least we got a chance to connect. Before we would have never known.
I know. How amazing.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. Have a great evening.
Thank you, you too.